So we're going to go ahead and get started. I have to say this is the most attended meeting we've had ever since we've been here. So thank you all for coming. It's actually even raining and it's still the most attended meeting that we've had ever. If I knew that this many people were going to be here, we would have had a bigger building. Tonight I'm going to introduce the staff real quick and then we're going to get started on the presentation. I just wanted to lay down some how we're going to proceed, and then I want to make sure everyone knows that there's restrooms. There's one right there, but I would use the one out there where it's multiple stalls out in the lobby. And tonight we're going to go through a full presentation, and I'd like to refrain from questions because the presentation has a lot of answers that I know you're going to have questions on. So let us get through that, and then we're going to move into questions and answers, and we have a panel of city representatives here tonight to do that for you. My name is Courtney Barker. I'm the city manager for the city of Satellite Beach. I know a lot of you out here already, so it's nice to, but I do see a lot of new faces, so that's great. We are recording this meeting as well, so we'll be uploading that onto our website if you want to go back and watch it again. It's very exciting for you. Or you can let your friends know that if they missed it, they can go watch it on YouTube. I want to introduce the staff members and council members that are here tonight to help out. And first is the mayor, Frank Catino, Councilwoman Mindy Gibson, our city attorney, Jim Beadle, one of our city volunteers and board members, John Fergus, Councilman Steve Osmer, Vice Mayor Dominic Montanaro, our Public Works Director, Alan Potter, and John Stone is not here yet. Okay, our fire chief back there, Dave Abernathy, who's now really worried about the occupancy rates in the building. And our recreation staff is here too. We have at least all of them, I think, are all. Cassie is back there, our recreation director. So we have a lot of people here to answer your questions tonight. Without further ado, I'm just going to go ahead and move in. We wanted to get you all together to start addressing some of the concerns that I see a lot on social media and a lot of questions that the council members get. I go to Publix and there for an hour because I just wanted to milk, but I got stuck answering, why is this building there, or what are you all doing with this property? And growth is very personal to all of us. It's part of our it's our community, and I understand that. If you know, a lot of you know me, but if you don't, I grew up here. I went to high school at Satellite High School. I've been here for, God, I'm going to say, about 35 years now. So and the mayor, same thing. Mayor and also Councilwoman Gibson. I went to school with Councilwoman Gibson, and a lot of the people that are in this room I went to school with. So. We have a vested interest in the community too. We love our city a lot. It's part of our lives. I think it's the best place on earth. I can't imagine living anywhere else. So we want to make sure that you all know that, and that we're, the decisions that we make is through those lenses and through that. It's not done out of what a lot of the claims you'll see on Facebook. So that's why we're here. We want to address those questions and comments and kind of give you an update. So here's some of the things that I'm seeing on Facebook. This is just one of the, we're going to turn into Fort Lauderdale, so just to kind of give you a background of the city and where we are today, we're not going to become Fort Lauderdale. But the fear is there, and it's understandable. We're going to talk about the history of the development of the city, of a lot of our public acquisitions, a lot of the beach preservation things that we've done. We're going to talk about current developments that you've seen. Some of the development decisions that you'll hear tonight were done 15 years ago. So, some of the people that I see are upset were like 15, now they're 30. Some people just moved here 2 years ago. They had no idea any of this, occurred. So. We want to make sure that you have that history. And then kind of an overview of property rights and how government approves development, because I think that's very, a big question that people always have. and then also the relationship between everything that we have done in terms of property preservations and how that affects our tax rates and how that affects your tax bill. So I'm going to ask the mayor to come up here and give the presentation on the history, because he's got way more history than I do. And way more history than I do. Yeah.
Thank you very much. So looking around the room, some of you I went to school with, and I see one person in the back, Lance. I think Lance is probably one of the only people here who's been here longer than I have. I'll speak as loud as I can. Okay, thank you. So I think Lance is the first child born here. I moved here like 1959, and there was only a couple streets. So I've seen the change. The city means a lot to me. So I want to run you through some of the history of how we obtained open space. So open space could be a lot of things. It could be a baseball field. It could be a park. And just open land that we have. So I'll go through how we got there, how we got the property on the ocean, and how we started the process. So Percy Hitchcock, one of the founding fathers, I can tell you one thing: if you stood around too long and he saw you, you did something. You raked the ball field, you picked up paper. He always put you to work. But he had a saying. Now, the reason they say I know what the saying was on the wall, because I spent a little bit of time in his office putting me to work for doing something I probably wasn't supposed to do. But it said, put a ball in a kid's hand and take the brick out. And it always has been kind of a motto of our city. And we started, recreation and open space was huge to them. Well, the city incorporated August 3rd, 1957. And in 1957, Lewis Olson, who was one of the major landowners. So if you were a major landowner here, you knew Percy well. And the first civic center was built in 1957. Olson Field, which is by our police department, was built the following year in 1958, where Mr. Olson and Percy donated the land to make the field. I can tell you that field was the center of town. It was, the lights came on, and about 800 people that lived here came out to the ball field, because that's all there really was. In that same area, there was a tennis court. Many people don't know where the court was, but it's where the Public Works building is, which was our first rec center. Prior to this, it was a slab of a tennis court that they decided to build. At that time, Kerry was the rec director. Just before Kerry, they built that. And that was kind of the start of the recreation programs in the city. We're kind of lucky. We're kind of a unique city because of our schools. Very few towns of this size has 4 schools in it. Very few. It came about by Percy, Sam Fuchs, a gentleman from North Carolina. Percy finagled them and other people to get all this land and donate it to the school board so they would put the schools where they're at this time. So Satellite came first, then Surfside, then Delora for the schools, then Holland. But Surfside was also land that Percy owned, and he sold it to the school board to build Surfside Elementary School. And Surfside was a very interesting place. The first day of school, the day before, it wasn't ready. And the number of people in the city, fire department, which was all volunteer back then, came out and they set up the inside of the school to make it ready for classes the next day. So that was the start of the schools in our town. Library in City Hall, 1965. Bought the land, I wish I could buy more land for that, $25,000. And that was part of the complex. There was the it was the library. City Hall was where the old, where the new police department is. If you looked at the building, the left side of our police department today is the old City Hall. So this was the library. And then came along Fuchs again for Samson Island Park. He donated 62 acres. He did 30. It was 62 acres total, which makes up Samson Island Park. At one time, they wanted to do a marina there, and they actually clear-cut a lot of that in the early days when they first obtained the land. Pelican Beach Park, 6.7 acres. Brevard County, again, sold to Brevard County by Mr. Fuchs in 1971, and the title was transferred up to us in 2012. So one of the parks, as you'll notice in town, as many of you do, there's a lot of different type parks that we have. We have developed, undeveloped, accesses. So there's different ones in different areas of the city. DeSoto Park, 15 acres, 1975. Again, that piece of property originally was supposed to be a school. Because of the amount of land in an area, they set aside lots for schools. That was a lot for the school. It was no longer needed because we had the schools already in place. So that DeSoto Park was sold to us, and we also built the baseball field there. And if you drive by there now, we're doing a retention because the state is mandating us with the Indian River Lagoon that we've got to clean the water. The volunteer fire station, 0.82 acres, purchased by the volunteer fire departments for $45,000 and donated to the city in 1977, and that's the fire department we have. We also got 40 acres from Brevard County, and we're pretty good at doing partners with people, and because we worked well with them, we've gained a lot of land in the city. This 40 acres, which has the public library on it, which is enjoyed by both cities. Then we have the dog park, the skate park, children's playground there, and the recreation facility that makes up football and soccer fields. That was the old sewage treatment plant there until the county moved it to South Melbourne Beach. We took it over because there was a tremendous need for recreation. You know, the population of young kids in the area kind of fluctuates. At that time, we had so many sports teams, we really didn't have fields enough for them to play. And this was a great deal for us. We bought it for $100. That was our deal to the county. That's worked out well for us. Preservation of other public land, beach accesses. I can tell you from a very young age, I always remembered them working on wanting to have more public and beach accesses. But it takes, we have 11 crossovers, Pelican Beach, Hightower Park. There's a new one right now going in the process. So we try to preserve as much of the beachfront as we could, and a lot of reasons, it costs money. You have to have two willing parties, someone willing to sell you and the money to purchase it. So, this didn't start 3 years ago. This started a long time ago, us trying to acquire land. Around 1979, there were some surveys sent out, and people very much supported the beach and also supported Pelican Beach and preserving the land on the beach. So in 1985, 77% of the people desired additional acquisition of beachfront property and recreation land. 2000, the beachfront shoreline, most prevalent response on surveys was then and again in 2011. If you took these surveys, erased the dates and laid them down, you're going to find one thing: you would not be able to tell the difference between them. So there was a referendum in the city back in 1981. And it said they were going to try to $30 a parcel for 10 years. And it passed 62% to 38% for the sole purpose of purchasing oceanfront property. Well, it passed, but the state said it was constitutionally illegal to do it. It was against the law. So we went back to square one. So we became, it took us a few years to find out and to so the money would be available for us to start purchasing land. Well, we were really good at getting grants. Matter of fact, the city's gotten over 22, if I'm right, $22 million. John, is that correct? $22 million in grants. Now, some of the grants we didn't even have to match, or very little. And that's how we started to build the 40% of beach property that we wanted. I can tell you, council back then, we wanted a lot more. But we didn't have funds to buy it. Or the person that owns that property didn't want to sell it to us. You know, we tried to go in with other cities to buy parcels of land, but we took 40% off. That was the most that we could come up with where people were willing to sell. So out of that, Hightower Beach is 15.3. We got a grant for it, covered most of it, $3.8 million. The city paid $7 million. Pelican Beach, 1.8. 2001, the total cost, $620. The city paid $100. We've had tremendous support from local organizations. The Women's Club, $100,000 on there. We used to have license plates, Save the Beach, and they raised $100,000 and donated it. Karate Park. A lot of the areas that are open today actually had building permits pulled on them, and we were down to the wire to get them. Karate Park, which is an area we really wanted very badly, a 6-story condo was already approved, and we got it. You know, it took a while. The gentleman worked with us, and we bought that remaining. That used to be a gas station for those who have lived here for long enough. It was the Hess gas station there. So that was purchased with Community Redevelopment Agency funds, $2.25 million in 2005. So, you want to do this or want me to read it? I'm going to read it. So, I can tell you we'd love to have more, but there's two sides to the story. The more we take off, the more it costs us. We don't get taxes on it. And for the services that are provided, you know, it costs us more because we've taken this property off. Myself, I love it off the tax rolls. I love the open space. So the city has gotten about 147 acres of open space. Parks, crosswalks to the ocean, baseball fields. Indian Harbor Beach has, let's round it off to 60, in the Atlantic 17. So we've worked hard to try to get parks and open spaces. Importantly, and then we'll explain to you the rest of the story on development and where we're at this present time. But this is how we did it over time. And I can tell you the surveys were amazing when we did the last one, that it was the same. Now, the idea, if you want to know about why crosswalks are where they're at, we were trying to make it where anybody who walked down the end of their street, they wouldn't have to walk a block in either direction to be able to cross the highway. And I can tell you, because I spent most of the day yesterday with the Department of Transportation, which is definitely an experience to try to get the crosswalks done correctly. About the 4th time we've met with them. But again, we want to have safe crossings, and we wanted to make sure that the community had the ability to get to the beach, because if you read the surveys, everybody wanted that. So, Courtney?
So when the mayor also talks about, you know, we're taking it off the tax rolls, we also have to maintain it. So this facility is one of those facilities. We took an entire commercial property off the tax rolls and made it into a community center, and it's a beautiful community center. We all love it. Our recreation programs just exploded once we received, you know, when we got the center. We've had it for about 10 years now? 10 years now? 20? 2000, yeah, it's God. So things are starting to get to a point where we have to replace things. We just replaced the AC unit. It's not working right now because there's a lot of people in here. But it cost $265,000. The gym floors, we're getting ready to replace. We got bids back for $110,000. We did the dance floors 2 years ago. That was $96,000 to replace those dance floors. So once we take things off the tax rolls, that's one side of the story, but we also have to maintain it. And that's where we're at today is we're trying to make sure that people know, sure, it's good to buy things like these centers and have these resources, but at that point, after we do that, we have to pay for it. And so it's not just removing the revenue, it's also adding an expense.
Question, can I ask one question?
No.
You got Satellite Beach and you're comparing to Indian Harbor Beach and Atlantic with how many acres we have set aside, open acres or parks? How do they compare acres, the whole area? How big is Indian Harbor Beach compared to Satellite Beach? How big is it the Atlantic compared to Satellite?
It's probably 1.5 times the land area.
They have more land than we do.
They have more land than we do, and we have more open space park.
Yeah.
Okay.
Indian Atlantic is significantly smaller than.
Yeah, Indian Atlantic is pretty small. It's only about 3,000 people.
Could you repeat the question? Because we can't hear that.
She was asking what is the total area of the cities that we're comparing to, and Indian Harbor Beach does have more land area than we have in the city of Satellite Beach. We have more population though. So, okay. So here we're going to go talk about Oceana. So I don't think I've met anybody that likes Oceana at all. But a lot of people don't remember that it was a hotel there, and the hotel was it was called the Ramada Inn. It had 108 units, and it actually had the original plans had an add-on that they could add on at any point, which was another 45 rooms on another building on that site. In 1985, the Board of Adjustment granted the height variances for that building. So the total height of the building was 85 feet, and it was built in 1986. In 2005, everybody remembers 2004 hurricanes, right? Yeah. Okay. If you weren't here, it was like hurricane after hurricane. And the Ramada Inn suffered a lot of damage, and the Ramada Inn, the hotel flag walked away from the building, and they put up the property for sale, and a developer purchased that property with an initial plan to renovate the hotel, but then changed to building a new condominium complex. And if you remember that time, this is when the uptick in the condominium market was occurring across Florida, and so if you lived on the beach or any waterfront area, you were likely being called by developers at this point to sell your home so they could turn it into condominiums. A developer also the same developer owned 1.9 vacant oceanfront acres called the Gemini. This is right across the street from Elwood. And this is what they had planned to build. They actually had building permits ready to go at this point. So the city, during 23 public hearings during 2005 and 2006, this is what I hear a lot. They did this in the back room and nobody knew. And it was 23 public hearings that this was discussed. And then this was in 2005 and 2006. And what they did was they said that the city said, could you deed us the Gemini property? Because it's right across the street from residential area. And this is a residential community. We don't really want this big, huge condo in front of them. It would be better to put it, to have that impact across the street from Publix, which is a commercial area, and will allow you to shift some height over there and do a bigger project across from Publix if you give us Gemini. So that was settled through a bunch of meetings and a developer's agreement. And part of those conditions of the developer's agreement was a $50,000 check to the city, which we actually just got, for A1A. So that's going to help us pay for the medians. Those medians will have landscaping and stuff in it. They're not medians right now, but that's what the social media calls them, medians. I thought that was actually kind of clever. I was like, but but that'll help us pay for that. And then we also got another beach access. So we already owned a beach access on the north side of the property, and we're getting another beach access on the south side of the property as part of that developer's agreement. Okay. So the Ramada Inn had 108 units with a transient population, which means in a hotel they use a lot of water, they have a lot of traffic. It's a commercial use. We don't consider it residential in the world of planning. I'm a certified planner. That's what I used to do before I became city manager. And so we don't consider a hotel residential. We consider it commercial. It has a much higher traffic impact, and hotels have a much higher water and sewer impact than a residential facility. So at full build-out, Oceana will also have 108 units. Okay? The estimated impact fees paid to Brevard County and the City of Melbourne by this development was $543,791.74. So two things I've heard on social media was that Oceana didn't pay impact fees. They did. Now, one thing that they did do is they got credit for the previous development that was already there. Okay? So when that happens, that is deducted out of the total impact fees that they pay. Their end cost is $543,000. If it was a vacant piece of property, it would be much higher than that they would pay. Okay? So transportation impact fees are charged by the county, and we participate in their transportation impact fee program. And impact fees, for those that don't know, are meant to pay for the impact of the development. So basically, you can only use it to expand capacity. You can't use it for maintenance. You can't use the money for anything else but to expand the capacity of the piece of infrastructure they're impacting. So if you accept sewer impact fees, that goes into a fund, and that's what they use to expand their plants. Okay? That's what they use to expand their lift stations, if they need to. If it goes to City of Melbourne, same thing. It goes to expand their plant. It goes to expand their capacity of their projects. They cannot use it to maintain lines. Same with transportation impact fees. We can use it to add things like sidewalks. We can use it to add turn lanes. We can use it to add a lane if you need to. But we can't use it to resurface a road. Okay? So transportation impact fees used to be charged by the county. However, the county placed a moratorium on these between 2009 and 2016. So unless they got their building permit after that, then they're not going to be paying impact fees. But any new development coming after 2016 that gets their building permit will be paying impact fees. So after Oceana, it was very controversial. Nothing's easy, right? So, there was a lot of people very upset about losing the hotel. Nobody wanted to lose the hotel. I mean, I remember I was upset about losing the hotel because I was like, we live in a community that you have to go to a whole other city when your relatives come to stay, because you don't want them staying with you. That was one of the issues that a lot of people had, was like, God, we're losing a hotel and we have this condominium, who's going to go there? Because when you think of a commercial use, you think of like, you got some access there, like the public can still go there. So there was a lot of people upset about that project. So what the city did was, the city added this referendum to the ballot that basically said, any increases in height or density in our land development regulations has to be approved by the voters. And that's in your charter right now. So if the city ever came in and said, hey, we want to take this zoning district and we're going to add, 20 feet to it, it has to go to you for approval on the ballot. Okay? Sorry, I'm getting a lot of feedback. So that was Ramada. It's being built now. I know everybody hates it, but trust me, I know everybody. I don't go anywhere without hearing about it. Trust me, anywhere I go, I get to hear about that project. But it's done. It's already there, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how those processes work on development approvals in a minute. I'm going to go through the Pelican Coast area. We call it Pelican Coast, or former South Housing. How many people lived here during the base housing, when it was base housing? So a lot of people remember what it looked like. I used to ride my bike through it. I'd get stopped by the MPs all the time for running stop lights. There's running stop signs on my bike. They were very strict. But it used to be base housing. It was built in 1957. It had 999 units on that property. Okay? It was served by Cocoa Water at the time. It's still served by Cocoa Beach Sanitary Sewer, which is unusual because the rest of the whole city is served by City of Melbourne Water and Brevard County Sewer. But for this particular property, it's served by, right now it's Melbourne, it's switched to Melbourne Water, but it's still served by Cocoa Beach Sewer, Sanitary Sewer. At the time, there was no stormwater treatment on the property. So back in the 50s and 60s and 70s and some of the 80s, people would build without stormwater. And now we know that's bad, right? So we have very strict stormwater laws now. It takes about, so if a new development comes in today, new stormwater laws can take up 20 to 30% of your property to put stormwater in. All of your stormwater is required to be retained on site in the city of Satellite Beach. By the 1990s, the housing was substandard and badly deteriorated. And I remember I had friends that lived in that housing, and I remember it being bad then, back when I was in high school. And so today it was still bad. This is what it looked like before demolition and the new development. This is what it was built out. So you see no ponds there. You see the open space with the baseball fields and the soccer fields. The city maintains the soccer field now at the west side of the property. That was an agreement we made with the base. So in 1998, Patrick Air Force Base issued a notice to privatize South Housing. And as a part of the federal installation, it was not either in the county or the city. So they had a choice of where they could go. They could either develop and be annexed into the county, or develop and be annexed into the city. They were interested in Satellite Beach annexation because of our city services, because they wanted Satellite Beach Police and Fire, they wanted Satellite Beach inspection services and things like that, and we were agreeable to waiving permit fees and providing an on-site inspector during their development, and expediting the construction and providing city services. And some of the reasons why we were interested in that is because obviously we're interested in the tax base to help offset the city services for the rest of our citizens. But we were also interested in controlling what went there. And we actually placed a referendum on the ballot in 1999 asking our residents if they wanted to annex the South Housing into the city. And that was the result of that ballot referendum. So I see on Facebook that we didn't notice the community when we annexed this property. And we actually went to the voter referendum, and then we also did all of the required notifications and all that. And some of this, the reason why I'm trying to tell you some of the rumors that we're hearing is because I want to make sure that you understand that when you see things like that, there's always a question there if that's really true. And you can always call us, do public records requests, anything like that, and we'll provide it for you. So if anybody called me and said, hey, Satellite Beach, can you send me a list of all your advertisements and ordinances that you did for the annexation of South Housing? We would, sure, and we'd email it to you. Takes 2 seconds, okay? Pelican Coast, after the referendum direction, the city approved a PUD, a planned unit development. And a planned unit development is basically a way to take a huge project and basically master plan the whole thing. And then it's subdivided out after a while to individual builders and developers. So they sell off the main parcels. And that's what happened here. So the whole property was developed at once, or planned at once in a planned unit development concept. And the annexation was effective on October 1st, 2003. So you can see how long that took. It took a long time for a lot of meetings, a lot of discussion, and a lot of negotiation with Patrick Air Force Base. And if you ever worked with Patrick Air Force Base, and I know a lot of military people are here, they are really slow. So I always make fun of them and say, every time I think of you guys at work, I think of you guys moving like this. Because they take so long to get anything done. But it's because they have a lot of approval processes, and that's kind of, the way the federal government works. But the PUD provided for all property north of Shearwater to be developed as private property. Okay, so they did like a bid, they sold it off to a bid, basically a bid process. All property south of Shearwater Parkway is military housing, and it's slated for that. So the Pelican Coast area, we're gonna take questions after the presentation. The Pelican Coast area where you see the base housing that's there, that's planned for the remainder of the south area of Shearwater, okay? From 2000 to 2004, at least 15 public hearings were held on this development. So some of the annexation benefits is the new homes meet current codes, which is always a benefit. Water connection to Melbourne. We had a master stormwater management plan that was approved with that whole development. And that's important because when you take that much property off an untreated stormwater system, it's a huge difference to the lagoon. It's just huge. And the type of treatment that's on this site is the wet retention, which is something that we prefer when we're talking about treatment for the lagoon. It increases the city tax base with non-military housing areas. The military housing portion of the project does not pay taxes because it's military housing. But what we did do is we litigated. Tried to think of a nicer way to say it. But we settled the litigation, and they pay us, the city, a payment in lieu of taxes, which is to help us offset the cost of services to that community. And if you look at what our tax rate would be and what they pay, it basically equals out. So it worked out for us in the end. And about 35% of the city the project still needs to be developed. If it was in the county, we can say with certainty that we would still be providing a lot of the EMS and fire and police services, because we do that with South Patrick Shores a lot right now, but we would not be getting any funding for that. Here's the approved concept plan. So you see everything south of Shearwater Parkway was planned for military housing. They've only developed a portion of that thus far, and I'll show you why in a little bit. But Montecito is, you can see there, and the 27 acres that everybody was talking about recently is there. Can you point that to the top corner right there? And that was planned for condominiums and townhomes at 85 feet, at a height of 85 feet. So what happened was, I see all those little blue areas, those big blue areas, that's stormwater, and they scrunched in units up into that corner, and the rest, the area south is a much lesser density, and the higher density is the area to the north, okay? So this is what it looked like, it used to look like, again, just to give you an idea. And this is what it's looking like now. So you can see a lot of it still needs to be completed. It's probably about, I would say, the area that is the wider area, that's currently the Montecito townhomes that are being constructed right now. Okay. So Montecito townhomes are being finished. The military private housing is approximately a third built out. And the remaining area south of Shearwater Parkway is slated for more military housing, and they're in agreement with the property owner to hold that property for military housing for another 30 years. The 27 acres north of Shearwater Parkway, they are wanting to change that concept plan to do a single-family homes instead of all those townhomes. They wanted to do single-family homes. And they're talking to us about doing 3 condo buildings and a hotel. And what the city did about a year and a half ago, we added hotel uses to the commercial uses of this project, specifically to see if we could get a hotel in the city to replace the hotels that we lost in the 2004 hurricane, or the hotel that we lost in the 2004 hurricane. Patrick Air Force Base has a significant interest in having a hotel there. They wanted to look at having returning vets have a place to go when they got home. And, you know, so there is a huge interest in having a hotel there. They want to do 3 condominiums similar to what you see in that plan, but replace a lot of those townhomes and with single-family homes and a hotel instead. We have not received their formal plans. We've been in discussions with them and we see layouts, but they haven't left anything with us or turned anything into us at this point. So this is the new housing units approved each year in the city, okay? And everything that you see here on this graph is redevelopment, meaning they tore something down to put something back. Because the whole city has been built out since the 80s. So there is no vacant land left that has never been built on unless it was on the ocean front that we preserved. Everything else, every other site in the city has been built on before. Something was torn down and it's either sitting vacant. And that's why we have names for all these sites, like the old bowling alley site, you know, who remembers the bowling alley, right? So I love it when new residents are like, but it's open space. And I'm like, no, it used to be a bowling alley. So all of these sites have had some type of development on it before. And so when you see these numbers, you'll see right here in 2005, the 194, that's when the Pelican Coast project was being constructed. When you see the 2016, 114, that's the townhomes, Montecito townhomes, and Oceana, the Oceana being developed. So you see distinct projects that are going up. All those little ones in between are little projects here and little projects there that are mostly concentrated in the PUD area, where Montecito is building a couple more townhomes and things like that. So that's really where all of the development that you see in the city occurring. So this is our population history, and I want to make sure people understand that, you know, the base used to be much more populated. When I was in high school, I worked at a restaurant that was right next to the base. That whole area, that whole plaza doesn't have restaurants anymore. But when it was 11 o'clock, it seemed like the entire base came into this restaurant. And there were military people everywhere at lunch. And they really kept a lot of the restaurants alive. When the base started declining in population, that's when you saw a lot of the businesses start closing. So we actually have less people between Patrick Air Force Base, South Patrick Shores, and the city of Satellite Beach today than we did even in 2000. And back in 2000, everything worked, the infrastructure was fine, the roads weren't crowded. We have capacity on the roads for these projects. We have capacity in the sewer and water plants for these projects, and I'm going to go through that in a minute. But that's the one thing that you'll see when, because change is scary to people, and I understand that, it's scary to me. But there is no overbuilding going on. It's the same lots that had something on it before that are just changing. It's the buildings are old and they're being replaced. And if you think about that, it's not necessarily a bad thing in many ways. Things do have to change at some point. We have to, you know, regenerate and move, you know, and keep our economy running. These are all of the public spaces that we own and what could have been used for potential living units. And we've taken about 913 potential living units off the table by acquiring these properties. In doing so, it does represent about 1/6 of our tax base. And so when I see Indian Harbor Beach's budget, I'm like, ooh, I really wish I had that revenue. Because they don't have, they have a full line of buildings along their ocean front, and they get a good revenue source from that. We don't have that, so we, you know, that impacts us in more ways than one. This is the information on our density. So I don't think we included this map in your packet. We'll put it on our web so you can see this, but this is basically our zoning map that shows how much density is allowed throughout the city, and it varies. Most of the density is along the ocean front, like most cities. We have done things in the past where we had a voluntary, a group of residents that lived on the beach by DeSoto, and this was done in 2007, where they were scared about condos. Like, what if one person sold? You know, are they gonna build condos and then, you know, right next to me? So they got together and they said, could you downgrade us, basically, downzone us? And so the city did. The city went through and took away the units in that area and took about 70 units off the table by doing that. This is our allowable height in the city. So you'll see 35 feet is the predominant color, that's yellow, okay? That's 35 feet. The green spaces are public. 40 feet is the blue, and that's Lansing Island, right? Yeah. And 65 feet is the gray, and that's what you see along the ocean front, okay? There's 185 feet, which is up there in the corner, which is that 27 acres of the old base housing, okay? And then there's 196 feet, which is the Ramada. That's it. So any changes to that map has to be approved by you on the ballot, okay? So the process for land use and development approvals, it takes about, if you had a really aggressive developer that had all the money ready to go and they were moving, and it takes about 3 years to go from approval to building permit. So a lot of times you'll see zoning changes, and then that's, you know, a lot of times you'll see a project go to a city council for approval, like with a zoning change, they want a rezoning, or they want a variance, so they'll go to the Board of Adjustment, or they want a conditional use permit, and you'll see nothing happen. And that's because at the city council approval stage, that's what we call planning. And I've seen the same sites rezoned 6 times before a project actually occurs, okay? So by the time it gets to that stage and the zoning is set, there is nothing we can do about it at that point. The next stage is approving a plat or a site plan. So either you're subdividing the property for like a subdivision, or you're approving a site plan for like CVS, like a commercial property, or a already platted lot. And then you issue building permits. That's generally the process. Of course, there's a lot more complicated things that are in there, and it's very simplified, but that's generally how it goes. So at the time that a project comes into us at the planning stage, they have to have concurrency. I mean, we call concurrency, that's the way we refer to it, but it means the development has to be concurrent with the public infrastructure available at the time. So you can't build something in hopes that we can't issue a building permit and say, well, in 5 years we're going to widen that road, so we can just do it now. You can't do that. You have to do it at the same time. So there must be public facilities available for that project when the project comes to the city for approval, or any local government for approval, and that's state law. And that's the state statute that's for that. And I'm going to have this presentation on the web for those that did not get a copy, so you can just go right up on our website and you'll see it. So you don't have to take pictures of it. I'll make sure you get it. And this is mandated by Florida law, so we have to do this. This is a process that we're all used to. This happened, I think this change happened in 2005 with growth management laws. And this is for everything, stormwater, parks. So you can even, if you don't have enough parks, that's actually a concurrency requirement. Water, solid waste, and sanitary sewer, and even transit, okay? I asked the sewer utilities, we posed a question, and this is their answer about their capacity. This is Cocoa Beach Sewer Plant. This is the sewer plant that serves the PUD, the Old South Housing, okay? And they said, on average, our treatment plant is 6 million gallons per day design and has the additional treatment capacity of 1.8 to 2 million gallons per day. Based on a equivalent residential unit, which is how we count, of 275 gallons a day, that would translate to 6,500 to 7,300 equivalent residential units. Obviously, those numbers would be in a perfect world with no infiltration, but this helps. So basically, if they kept up their maintenance and they don't have a lot of infiltration coming into the system, they would be able to handle 6,700 more units onto their plant. Okay? This is another thing I hear a lot. We don't have enough capacity in the sewers. That's why I'm giving you this information. Brevard County South Beaches, not as in good of shape, but they're getting there. They're trying to do a lot of sewer work right now. The wastewater treatment plant that serves Satellite Beach and all of Beachside, okay, is 8 million gallons per day plant. They currently have 551 gallons of capacity available, or 2,755 equivalent residential connections. Okay, so the areas that we're talking about are adding hundreds of units, like 300 units, not 3,000. Okay. So one of the common misconceptions I think a lot of people have is when a developer comes to the city and they have the zoning, or even if they don't have the zoning and they're asking for a rezoning, that the city or county, whoever they're coming to get approval for, has this carte blanche ability to say no. And that couldn't be farther from the truth. There's a lot of restrictions that local governments have in denying and approving property developments. And that is really couched in our Constitution, in the protection of private property rights, that a lot of individuals enjoy, but when they see a development coming, they go, ooh, you know, can we just say no? And the answer is no, they cannot say no. We also have the added problem of the Burt Harris Act in the state of Florida, which is an additional layer of property right protection. And this basically says that if we downzone a property, if we do pass any regulation that affects the value of a property, we have to pay for that difference or that loss of value. And not only do we have to pay for that loss of value, but we also have to pay all the attorney's fees for the other side. And as you know, in addition to the attorney's fees that we incur. So that's an added concern for any council or county that's doing a property regulation or designing a regulation that impacts property values or property rights. Okay. I wanted to give you this case. This case is in your packet. That this is basically a case in the city of Melbourne. This is interesting in that it was really watched by a lot of people in the planning world, which I was in before when this was going on. And I thought the write-up is a lot of times the courts will write up things like this, but this one I thought was it's very simple and simplified that I think most people can understand. I'm going to read the whole thing. I put a quote in here, but I'm going to read a whole section that I think kind of summarizes the challenges that cities and counties have when faced with development approvals. And this happened with a development on Wickham, and this property owner was an apartment complex builder. They wanted to build a new apartment complex that had affordable housing in it. And the residents were very upset surrounding that property. And they wanted, the city ended up denying the property approval or development approval based on drainage at a rezoning hearing. And this is what the court had to say. This court has pointed out before that it is mindful of the pressures that are on members of City Council. They are elected by their constituents from their particular districts. They serve as a legislative body. They reflect the wishes of their constituents. They are pressured by homeowners and developers. There are constant pressures on them from many competing interests. However, since the case of the Board of County Commissioners, of Brevard County versus Snyder. This is a case that basically said all zoning hearings or land use hearings are quasi-judicial, meaning they have to be run like a court. When they sit as a zoning board on zoning issues, they are sitting as a quasi-judicial body. That is, they are judges. They are bound to follow the rule of law as opposed to the will of the people. They are wearing a different hat than when they are legislators representing their constituents. They have an obligation under the law to listen to the evidence, to be fair and impartial, and render a decision on the facts as they find them and apply those facts to the law. In this case, the council has failed in their quasi-judicial duty. And they go on to talk about how they did that. So a lot of the ideas that city councils can just say no is not true. Once a property is zoned and regulations are set, that's it. The property owner has rights now, and those rights are given to them through the zoning code. This is another one in DeLand, in Colonial Apartments. This is one in which the property owner came in and they had a zoning right to 13 units or 16 units an acre, and the council said, we're going to give you that. We're going to let you rezone and do your project, but you have to do 6 units an acre. And the courts, the property owner sued and said, and this is what they said: owners are entitled to fair play. The lands which they represent their life fortunes should not be subject to ad hoc legislation. Density is one of the most important elements in the marketplace today in determining land value. When a law establishes specific allowable density, its clear terms cannot be varied by a forced interpretation of intent. Such an ordinance should be interpreted in accordance with its plain meaning. So basically the court said, you don't have the right to do that, council. Once you set their zoning is their zoning. You don't have the right to come in and decrease it because the residents or surrounding that property were upset. This is FA Inc. versus City of Ocala. This company, it was owned liquor stores, and they wanted to open one in a commercial district that allowed liquor stores. But for some reason, the city required a special approval process for liquor stores in the zoning district, and the city council ended up denying them, and they sued, and they came back and won, and they said, and this the court says, we emphasize that this is not a case where a rezoning of property is sought. Here, the city has already determined that the land is suitable for the use requested by zoning in a manner which permits that use. If any additional requirements are to be imposed, the owner or purchaser of property so zoned has a right to know what the requirements are that he must comply with in order to implement the permitted use. These requirements must be uniform in application, and once the requirements are met, the governing body may not refuse that application. So once the zoning is done, it's done. So going back to this process, where do you think the most public involvement is most effective? Creating the regulations. That's where you have the most effectiveness. Because once the regulations are created and are set on that property, the property owner has those rights now. So that's where, when you see an ordinance being discussed about land development regulation changes and things like that, what we're doing right now, we're changing setbacks for construction along the ocean front. We sent a letter to every property owner to come talk to us about that, because we're changing the regulations that affect their property. That's where your involvement needs to happen, is at that time. Once we get to, when you see a site plan come up forward, there's very little the city council can do. And I can see the frustration with people. I've seen it for the last 20 years doing government work and seeing, especially in approving developments, I see the frustration of residents. They come to the public meeting because they get the little sign, the little notice, they're in that little, radius that we have to notice people. But by then, the council's stuck. If they're developing within the zoning code, the council cannot deny that. They can't say no. they'll go to court. And we know that. I've heard that too, like, we can say no. Well, yeah, we can, but that's irresponsible when we know we're gonna lose in court. We can't do that with taxpayer money to make a point. You know, we know that we're gonna lose. So I can see frustrated, people walk out like, God, nobody heard me. Nobody cared. And I understand that. But at that point, it's too late. The time to get involved is when we talk about land development regulations. So this is what we're talking about now. I created a group called the Climate Ambassadors. I have some of mine in the room right now. Raise your hand. Some in the room. So some of them have been helping us. When we do land development regulation changes, it's usually the staff puts it together, then we take it to P&Z. P&Z is the Planning and Zoning Commission. Then it goes to the City Council, and then it gets approved. Because of like construction setbacks on the beach, discussions about what I'm going to talk about with height limitations and things like that, those are such a big deal to the community. Before we brought it to the community, I wanted to have a group of people who raised their hands, help me put together, like, do we really want to go through this? Is this a good idea? Is this a problem that we need to solve? So we're talking about that right now. And those meetings are on YouTube, so if you get on our YouTube channel, you can watch what's being discussed. And you can come to the meetings too. So we advertise those. But this is what we're talking about right now. This is a commercial development. This is ABC Liquor. Everybody knows where ABC Liquor is? I do, trust me. I do have this meeting. But ABC Liquor is, you see these big triangles, right? Here and here? That's stormwater, right? See all the landscaping and the parking? That meets our current code. In fact, actually, ABC was built before even the newer stormwater laws came out. And this is what most of our commercial sites look like right now, where it's devoid of landscaping, there's not a tree on site, and there's no stormwater. So we have to meet what the state calls total maximum daily load reductions of nutrients from our stormwater system going into the lagoon. And when we do that with stormwater projects. And if we don't get the commercial businesses to do it, guess who gets to do it? You do. We do. So we get to acquire the property. We get to build the ponds. So there's two ways to do that. We can make adjustments to get them to do it, or we could end up doing it. We bought a property over here, right across the street, it hugs the canal. We're putting a small water pond there. $565,000 cost us to buy that property. So that's, something we'd rather not do. We'd rather not continue to do that. We'd rather get the private property owners to get involved and do that. This is a property that's right across the street from Pelican Beach Park. Everybody know what this is? You like it? Looks nice?
Yeah, it's pretty fun.
It's 42 feet. We can't build it today, because our land development regulations are 35 feet for commercial property on A1A, and we now have a charter provision that says you can't go above that, right? So if we want to lift up buildings off the ground and put stormwater and parking underneath, we need to add 10 feet, 10, 15 feet to our height limitations. So that's what we're talking about right now. We're talking about that with you. That would, if that went to City Council and went through the process, it would go on the ballot for you guys to vote on. Okay? And that would only apply, we're only talking about the properties on the west side of A1A that are commercial lots. It's the only thing we're talking about right now. Because that's what we're focusing on, is the lack of stormwater on commercial properties. And if you drive down A1A, now that you know, you'll start looking at it, you'll be like, ooh, she's right. It's all a sea of asphalt. It has no landscaping and there's no stormwater. So those are some of the things that we're trying to fix. So if you hear rumors that we're increasing height and density, those are the things that we're talking about. I wanted to go through doubles real quick, because that's another one. Like, good Lord, we're corrupt, you know. So, we purchased this property in 2006. I gave you the minutes. That's one of the handouts we gave you. That'll be on the web too. When that, everybody, do you all remember Corinthians and Pedlegs? Anybody? Yeah. My husband used to live in Corinthians when he was younger. I still make fun of him for it. And how many people didn't work at Peg Leg when they were a kid, you know? So when that property was closed down and demolished, the residents surrounding that area appealed to the city and said, hey, can you buy it? Because we don't want a gas station there. And it's at a lit intersection, which is a requirement of our code for any gas station. So we had a lot of interest from gas station companies. By the way, there's no law at the time that prevented a gas station. So that was another hurdle. The city retained, what we purchased the property for $1.5 million. It was the height of the market. Shortly after that, it all fell. The whole market fell. I was here, my house fell too. And we had no interest in anybody purchasing the property. There was no commercial market here. We had foreclosures everywhere. I mean, so there was no commercial market for many years. And we just started now getting interest about 3 years ago. And we've had a realtor for the property for 5 years. We actually bid it out several times and never got any response. We did have a lot of interest from gas stations. So we could sell the property tomorrow, buy for $1 million for a gas station. Nobody wants a gas station though. Nobody has come to the council and said, except for one person, we had one person say it, that we should sell it to a gas station. What we have had people say is we want a nice restaurant, we want something family oriented, we want something compatible with the surrounding community. So when Doubles came along, we thought, wow, what a perfect fit, because everybody knows Doubles. In fact, the owner lives right across the street from the property. You know, how much more ownership can you have in the community? And so we started negotiating with them. Because of the restaurant use, the property value is different than a gas station use. It's lower. So the value for a restaurant is about $745,000. So what we did for the $600,000 cost, we negotiated with them to create a very sustainable project, because that's, again, a big focus of the city. And so they're looking at putting on solar within 5 years of the development. They're getting rid of the styrofoam and plastic uses over at the restaurant. A lot of operational changes. They're putting in the stormwater we need, all of that stuff. And so all of that is being negotiated in a final developers agreement that council will approve once we get that negotiated and the contract period's over. So we haven't actually closed on the property at this point. It's under contract. But again, the city, I don't think I've had anybody come up and say, why did you sell it to Doubles? That's horrible. We did get some questions on the cost and why it was so low, and that's why, because when you change the use of the property, you lower the value. Okay. So I think what I just want to leave you with before we start taking questions, because I'm sure you have a bunch, is that just be very careful of media speculation. If you see people who don't want to pick up the phone or do public records requests with us, it's probably because they don't really want to answer the question. We will be glad to say, we do public records requests all the time. And if you have a question, you know, hey, what are the minutes for that project that was done, 5 years ago or whatever, we'll be glad to send it to you. We have most of the stuff electronic now. It takes us 5 seconds to pull it up and email it to you. So it's no big deal. And we're here to do that. We would rather give you the correct information than combat this on social media, which is what we feel like we're doing all the time right now. And so always understand that the devil is in the details. The approval process for a project are very complicated. There's a lot of details that are often left out of memes or comments on Facebook. And please be careful that broad statements of fact are usually not fact. That's all I leave with you. I'm going to turn it over to the mayor to do some final comments, and then we'll start taking questions from the audience, okay?
Thank you. And thank you to my staff who spent a lot of time putting this presentation together. We appreciate it. We're going to go into your questions. Here's how we're going to handle it. To start, we'll get to everybody. If you are a resident of the city of Satellite Beach, we will take you first. So that doesn't mean if your mailing address says Satellite Beach. It means if you live in our city limits, we would like to take you first. And what we'd like to ask you is if you hear your same question, please make that be, your question like yours, because we have a lot of people here, and I'm sure they have questions. So at this time, we'll open the podium. Is there a piece of paper there for them to sign in?
There it is.
Okay, please sign in, fit where you're from, and please ask a question, and we'll direct it to the person to answer it for you. Podium's open for Satellite Beach residents. Please sign and then ask your questions. And state your name, please.
Thanks. Hi, I'm Jean Hermson, and I'm a new resident
Talking.
into this.
Adam, yes. Just up, please. We want to make sure we get everything recorded, so
Okay,
thank you.
I can do karaoke. All right. Sorry, is this better? Okay. Kevin and I are newer residents. We've been here 2 years now. We bought our house for 4. We've lived here for almost 2 and absolutely love it. I'm going to get the phrasing incorrect, but when we talked about raising the height variances on the west side of A1A for commercial developments, is that something that is being addressed as a blanket, everything could go up, or is it parcel by parcel depending on the project? You showed the one project.
Yeah, so that would be, you have to apply regulations, throughout the zoning district, and that would be a commercial zoning district along A1A. So it depends on what the citizens and the council decide on, because we really haven't gotten that far. We know that we've identified the problem that we would like to fix, but how we do that is still up in the air, and we're still having a lot of discussions on that. So, I think it would be, for people that are interested in it, great if you all could come to the meetings, because this is the time that we talk about it. We were envisioning it would apply an even regulation across the commercial districts that are adjacent to A1A on the west side only, not on the east side, but just the west side, and that the it would have to, they'd only get the height if they put in the stormwater and the parking and came up to a standard that we were requesting.
Thank you.
Hi, my name's Ray Land. My wife and I are residents since 2005, and we live in Montecito. When we bought our home in Montecito, we were given a plot map of the whole development. And at that time, it was really mostly single-family homes with some townhomes. But there was a map for the condominium section. And that map was about 13 low-level condominium buildings with no hotel. So much to our surprise, last year, what appeared on the internet was a map showing Soviet-style condominiums lining A1A and a hotel. So you said earlier that something like that would have to go through a process, and I think you said you really haven't received the final plan yet. But what we're wondering is where and when was the hotel approved or accepted, or said you would accept a hotel in that spot? And we're doing this in the context of trying to make left turns off of A1A onto Shearwater, and we can't do it now because the renovation only left 3 spots for cars, so we're imagining another couple hundred units there, and then the townhomes So maybe 1,000 people trying to make a left turn onto that road. And so but our big concern is, where did this hotel come from? And what is the process by which it needs to be approved? Is it approved now, or do they have to go through a process, a public process, to get it approved?
So the zoning district allows for hotels, and that was done about a year and a half ago, approximately, to add hotels to commercial uses. But
How is that done?
What year?
through an ordinance about a year and a half ago, and that was by an ordinance.
Was that public hearing, or?
Yep,
Do you know the ordinance number?
I don't have that on top of my head.
Okay.
If you're interested, we can email that to you. But if they come in for approval, yes, they have to come back in for a concept plan change. A lot of the entrances that I can see that they're envisioning for that property are not from Shearwater Drive. They're from A1A. So a lot of the traffic concerns will be more on an A1A-ish, level than the Shearwater.
So just to be clear, there's an ordinance approving hotels generally.
They
For
allow
this
for
specific
hotels.
property, it has to go through a process to get specifically approved. Now, do we as the citizen get to get involved in that, get to observe that?
Yeah, it's public hearing, they're all public hearings,
And then who makes that decision?
the city council.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Jamie Garber. I've lived in Satellite for a while and I grew up here, but my question is kind of specific to that property that the last gentleman was talking about too, that portion of the former base housing that now is kind of halfway torn down. I've seen a sign probably last summer that it was for sale and then it was closed. So it seems to me that it's changed hands, and I don't know if that's public record, who the seller and the buyer were in the situations, but my question,
Come on,
my
Adam, let's
question
get
kind
it
of
together,
relates to
huh?
the fact that from like, a property sale standpoint, that I would assume that there are certain, as a, commercial sale, that there has to be an environmental phase 1 and possibly phase 2 done in connection with the sale. And is that public record, was there some reason that property is exempt, or was there actually that kind of requirement when the sale took place?
Yeah, so, that's a requirement between property owners if they want to do that at the sale. But usually they do because they know the city's going to want it anyway for development. They did do a phase 1, I have that, it's public record, so if you want that, I'd be glad to
So the
email you.
phase 1 that was done on the sale, that was on the sale a year ago, indicated that a phase 2 was not necessary?
That's correct. And then when that property was sold from the Air Force Base to the private sector, phase 1 and phase 2 were completed to NEPA standards. And then when the property sold from, American Eagle? Right, American Eagle to Hunt Pinnacle for the Pelican Coast section, another phase 1 and phase 2 were done. And then at this point, when Montecito was completed, phase 1 was done, and then, and so on. So there's been a lot of phases.
Sir, there's a line back there. Thank you, that's okay. Just want to make sure everybody gets a fair chance there.
Oh, good? You're in.
You're in. You're in.
My name is Marie Fonzie. I'm president of the New York Homeowners Association, and our community is right across from Pelican Beach Park. I don't have to tell you what we're concerned about. There's solar panels that went up. It looks like a gas station or a Wawa, and it has certainly affected the property value of our properties because the two-story townhomes have now had ocean views obstructed. We understand that there are plans to expand that panel the whole length of the parking lot. I wonder if that is true. And then I have a question. Why were those ugly things put on prime beach property instead of somewhere out west?
So that is a carport solar panel project with FPL. They basically install these to provide solar electricity to the grid. They're leasing that space from the city. As part of the lease agreement, we asked that they put outlets in for our festivals, so that when we have vendors come in for the Ocean Reef Beach Festival and so on, that they could just plug right in and we're not gonna lose electricity like we did the last festival. And most of those festivals are done on generator. But it's a solar panel project and provides shade and basically covered parking for the park. So, I mean, I understand that there's different tastes of different people, but it's a clean energy project that provides electricity for our festivals and covered parking.
It just doesn't make sense to put it on Palm Beach property. It is so ugly, and it is affecting our property value by being there. And we're also wondering, what happens when we get the 100-mile-per-hour hurricane? What's gonna happen to those solar panels?
Those are designed to 165-mile-an-hour winds.
Well, the
so-
other panels further north of us came down in the last storm.
Those are much older panels and they're private property in it. So they were done a long, long time ago. These are new new standards that they're designed to basically take a hit.
Up to what, 100 miles?
165-mile-an-hour wind.
And if they come through our property, then what happens? Who's responsible, FPL or the city?
It's just like any other storm-related event. If, you know, your roof falls off and lands in somebody's yard and hurts their car or whatever, it's not your liability, it's a storm, and people recognize that.
Have you heard anyone in the town say they're happy with their solar panels on the beach?
Yes, we've got a lot of positive.
You're happy with them?
So we're
I thought it was
we're
a
just
band
gonna
show
move to
when
the
they
next
first started.
question, because I understand that
Culture
there's a
stuff.
difference in opinion there, but we answered the question and we need to move on to the next group.
Patrick Buckley, live in Montecito, about 9 years now. Question on overflow parking for High Tower Beach. People are using that southwest corner of the intersection. And as we've heard rumors at least that that's going to continue, but we don't know there'll be 1 car or 10 cars, so could you enlighten us?
Yeah, the concept plan actually has a spot for the city to have parking there.
How many?
So it could move, you know,
Yeah.
or I'm sure we'll be negotiating on the amount, that always happens, but it is on that concept plan and that was provided for at the onset of that project.
Is there about an approximate number of cars that would handle?
I couldn't tell you, I haven't really looked at it in that long.
Thank you.
Is it online?
The concept plan, it will be, it's on here, so you can see that online.
My name is Matt Fleming. I live at 1777 A1A, which is down near Solomon Beach. So with the planned unit development and towers across from Publix and raising heights on the west side of A1A and widening the beach, most of the residents I talk to are very concerned that what we're doing is dramatically altering the character of the town. How would you address that concern, and what do you say to people that just don't agree with it?
Well, Matt, one thing is it is a planned unit development. The way that property came to us with government was there was X amount of units they needed on that property. We thought we could control it better if it was within our city. So a little bit of history on that piece of property. There's less impact on that piece of property today than there was in 1965. How many people lived here in 1965? Okay. There was 1,000, let's say 999 for our conversation, 1,000 units there. There was approximately 4 people per unit. It's going to you had to be married with children to be on that piece. The graduating classes of Satellite High School back then compared to now are drastically different. There was another elementary school on base. Sea Park Elementary School was at capacity with portables. It's approximately what, 50% now, 60? Holland's down. So the number of people that impacted that development in our streets then, I can tell you, I lived here. A1A was a lot more crowded with people going to the base and so forth back then than it is now. And we had a development then who couldn't be built today because of the St. John water management plan for the lagoon, for stormwater runoff. There was nothing there. It was street flow right into the lagoon system. So what we're hoping is to build a better project, more environmentally friendly to the area, and not as much impact from a numbers standpoint. And the facts are there.
I mean, I would just add that we're all concerned with the character of the community too. When we grew up here too. So we absolutely understand the fear. I mean, that is completely understandable. But my answer would be, things change, and we can either guide that change and make it something we want, or we can fight it and watch it ultimately fail, and then we will end up having to do something we might not want. So that's basically the answer, and I know that there may be people that disagree with some of the choices, but if you disagree, get involved. I mean, we are an open book. We have meetings that like tonight, I send a postcard to every resident in the city. And we do that all the time. You see letters from me all the time, don't you? You know, the town hall meetings, stuff like that. We have, when we started 5 years ago, we increased our communication budget by, 300%. Because of that reason. We want to make sure you're involved. So if you don't like what's going on, get involved and try to change it. Sometimes you're not going to win. You know, I mean, it's a majority vote, you know. So, but if you don't try, we don't know that you're upset. So, get involved.
My other concern was with the development that is, I guess, the old Pelican Coast. But that developer has a long record of fraud and bankruptcy. The guy, there was something that involved a catfish farm. Has there been testing done in that area to determine that it's free of PFOAs by either the developer, the city, or any other agency? And if it hasn't, are we going to see that development put on hold until it can be determined that there are no cancer-causing chemicals in the ground?
They did a phase 1, which is the process that we go through on, environmental assessments, and that phase 1 came back that there was no need to do any of those testing. Like I said before, I think it was when the military sold the property, they did phase 1 and phase 2. They did soil sampling and water tests, and that's two NEPA standards, and that is what they did before they sold the property. So all that's been done.
Is there, can we look that up somewhere?
Yeah.
Where?
I think we have it at the city, if I'm not mistaken. So we can provide that. The other issue too is Pelican Coast is the military housing. So
Well,
are you talking about the 27 acres?
acres,
So
the wine mill
when a developer has a background, that has no concern to us. I mean, we don't control their financing, we control zoning, that's it. So if they have problems like that, that's their problem. The only time we're concerned with that is if we're entering into a financial agreement with them, or like we had at the corner of A1A and DeSoto, we had the hotel site. We had concerns that the property owner or the prospective buyer couldn't do that boutique hotel, restaurant, and townhome project financially. So we let that contract go and started looking for another buyer. In that instance, we can control that and we can respond to those concerns. But if we don't own the property, they could be like, 5-time felon, but if they're out, they're out.
Yeah, I think the main concern is people just want to see City Hall sticking up for residents.
So, just to expand on that, we're always sticking up for our residents, and we're always here for our residents because we are residents. But the one thing that we can't do is disregard state law and 100 years of court case law in doing that. We're not allowed to do that. That's our constraint. We have to work with the constraint that the state and federal government provides.
My name is Rebecca Pokorny, and I live Seaton Drive for almost 10 years now. My question is quick. The A1A was just paid and the sidewalk was done. Is this project done or not? Because
No.
in between, I think van and some little sidewalk. And we have to cross.
They're ready to visit.
I'm in your area too.
Yeah.
You're right, because these sidewalks are done.
They are done?
Yep.
So
We
we
will
will not
come
have
back,
sidewalks.
well, we're gonna try to come back and acquire right of way there to add sidewalks, and the DOT is supportive of our efforts in that. But we tacked on to their resurfacing project, basically maintenance, a whole lot of stuff that they did for us after years of arguing with them and kicking them, and screaming, and meeting with them over and over again. But they were not gonna acquire right of way in that project. And so they filled in the sidewalks everywhere they had right of way. In the areas that you see there's no right of way, there's either a ditch under the ground that we need to pipe, or we need to acquire land to put the sidewalk in. So we are committed to finishing that and filling in those gaps, but it's gonna take a couple of years to do that. Okay, and so the resurfacing project is not done. We're still mad
We were there
about
yesterday
how
for
long
a
it's taking.
few hours.
But it's not done yet.
So one thing on that, if, for those who remember, A1A was 2 lanes. When they formerly did, obviously they didn't have enough right of way in certain areas and it was used up. And we went, yesterday was our 4th time to FDOT concerning the so-called crosswalks and so forth. So I think we got somewhere yesterday, we're hoping we have, to light them. They promised us they would be lit for people to cross and make it safer. So, and the project is not done. Along with the project not being done, when you look at the medians, the reason they weren't done earlier is because the project wasn't done. We didn't want to landscape them and do them, and then they get destroyed by the people working there. So they will be. It's just we need that project to be finished before we can continue.
Thank you for your time this evening, first off. My name is Charlie Reese, 648 Palm Drive. I just had a question about zoning densities on the west side of A1A with the Pelican project. Do you know what the zoning density per acre is on that project?
It's 1 per 5 acres. I mean, 5 units per acre, sorry.
Oh, 5 units. Okay, so it's within under that, correct?
Yes.
Okay, that was it, thanks.
Yeah, you just see them scrunched up. So it's called clustering, planning term for that. You got any more questions?
I have a very quick question. I'm George Caruso, I've been here for a long time. You talked about the west side of A1A at South Housing. Is the east side all federal property?
It's city property.
It is city property.
Yep.
Will that make that be an open space?
Yep. It's actually preservation. It's in preservation easements. It could never be
It can
developed.
never be developed.
And that's from Atlantic Plaza all the way to South Patrick Shores?
Generally.
Generally. So there's the last house as you go north on the west side. There's one more lot in there that is a residential lot between Paradise Dance Club and that house.
And we
From
don't know
there,
that.
all the way to the existing building down at the university to the north is all preservation land. We can never develop.
Great. Thank you.
Any further?
Now, I gotta open up my mouth. Another meeting. Dale Abrams, I've been here for 20 years. It's been incredible. What an experience. I've gone through CRA issues, all kind of budgets. I spent 4.5 years going to council meetings. And I'm gonna tell all of you, if you wanna know what's going on, you either show up for a council meeting or you see it on YouTube. And you need to participate in the budget. I spent 1 year till 1:30 in the morning, line by line, looking at the budget of the
If there's
city.
anyone that does routinely come to our meetings, participates in every one of them, is Dale.
And I have to say, the new kids pushed for YouTube. Thank you.
That's good.
Thank you last night for saying the planning advisory board is now gonna be on YouTube.
It's a great suggestion.
Okay? I mean, these are important things. It affects your property, your taxes, okay? Now, I'm gonna talk about the mid-headway thing on A1A. All right, we're gonna put lights up there.
Yep.
There's a lot of talk.
You just committed.
Yesterday, we were at the land with FDOT for the X number of time, and we told them before we left, we wanted a letter of commitment to have them there. To
Got that
give you a
today.
little bit of history there, the U.S. government outlawed them. They put a hold on those, and it backlogged FDOT on them. So now they're back at doing it, and our meeting yesterday was specifically that if you're putting crosswalks in, and you're putting signs and marking them, that if they don't light, they're gonna be a death trap. And so we were given assurance yesterday that they will light these. And there's a kind of a few different type of lightings that can be used, but they are gonna be lit. So you hit a button, they're gonna flash.
Okay, so this is DOT.
Yes.
FDOT, yeah.
Because I went to all the DOT meetings regarding this project back in the day. I have done maps and all that kind of stuff, and we had all this discussion. I just want to say that recently, I was down in the Atlantic, and they've got one that's lit up in front of the ABC just before 192, and guess what? I almost got rear-ended. Okay, now we're gonna have one at Volunteer.
You're gonna have 6.
Yeah, we're gonna have one at Volunteer, then we're gonna have one at Sunrise, then we're gonna have one at Magellan, and then we go up towards, what is it, Grant?
They're actually planning all through Indian Harbor. We planned ours a lot earlier, so we have 6 in our city. They're planning,
I'm talking in the Atlantic.
yeah, they're planning Indian Harbor and in the Atlantic in the future to have, just like our city.
I think Indian Atlantic's only doing one. Indian Harbor, I think,
Yeah,
is
they are.
looking at, what is it, Atlantic Boulevard where the Shell station is, because they
Yeah, they were
missed
doing
that
that.
one.
I
they missed
think the
that.
number they gave Dale yesterday at the meeting was there was 9 sites to get this.
My point being, think about this, okay? Think about the space between Volunteer, which is the end of the city, and Magellan. We got 3 of them. I know a lot of people from Sunrise are concerned about safety issues and so forth. And, you know, to have 3 of them so close together, okay, I don't know, when the snowbirds come down, you know, it's gonna be crazy.
Well, we're gonna have definitely a driver adjustment period. We'll have a lot of enforcement to assist with that. We're actually applying for a grant through FDOT to help us pay for that enforcement. But there's a lot of
What do you mean by
education.
enforcement?
Whenever, with PD sitting out there making sure people don't run into the back of you when you stop.
Tickets, revenue
Because
generator, excellent.
the revenue that we actually get from tickets is pretty small, but, so the idea is to help people change their behavior. Whenever you do changes like this in the roadway, right, I can't tell you how many phone calls we've gotten from people upset about the project.
It's all
The
over
minute-
social media.
Yeah, the minute you change and I've been through this with every construction project I've ever done in my entire career, whenever you change the structure of a roadway, you change people's driving patterns that they're just really used to, and it hurts them in their heads. And so it takes a while for that adjustment to happen. And it's funny because if you try to change it 5 years later, they get mad at you for changing that. So it'll take some time for people to adjust, but again, the amount of pedestrians that we have accessing our beaches, we have 16 beach accesses in the city, 16. So that's why we have a lot of pedestrian crossings, because we have so many beach accesses. So we're trying to make that safe, and that was a request from all the people in the public meetings that we had regarding A1A and what we developed at that time.
And the other thing on that is, remember those surveys we were talking about? In those surveys, you, the citizens, wanted safe crossing of A1A. It's taken us a long time because the last time they were through here was 40 years ago. It's probably when they 4-laned it. So they're here, they're going to go in, and it is going to take some behavioral changes by us as drivers to make it safe. But we do have a lot of parks, and the accesses, again, we wanted accesses for people to be able to enjoy the beach, because that's what they asked for in all these surveys.
One question, is there any possibility of DOT reducing the speed?
Thank you, I was just going to bring that up. So Dale, here's the deal. We asked them yesterday, we've asked them for years, and everything with DOT is a study. I mean, a study on everything. Well, I think we got somewhere yesterday, because they are taking a look at this A1A corridor as a whole. The base piece of property up there is might be a little different but we can show them there's 35 miles an hour in Cocoa Beach. You hit Melbourne Beach, you have it too. So they are well aware of our askings to reduce it. And I hope, you know, we're really hoping that that will come through. We had a really good meeting yesterday with them, and I really think we got places.
Thank you. Reduction of speed limit, I just have to say, is like 50-50 in the population. There's like 50% that are like, please don't reduce it, and there's 50% that want it reduced, so.
Ron Dragutis, resident of Satellite Beach. I also attend meetings with Ron, but one of the biggest things I want to say is, we know we have issues with cars out there. Can we please, and can you ask the road department of the state to educate the bicyclists and the pedestrians to also use caution, because it happens in a split second. Everyone needs to be educated here, not only the automobiles, because we do know that they have the right of way, but the bicyclists, there's got to be some flyer put out there, some way, shape, or form, that they get aware of this. And I've seen them on DeSoto and A1A where, I'm going to tell you an incident today. A person was not in this city, but they had a crosswalk and they're jaywalking. So that's very dangerous. They may think it's all right if they don't see a car, but it's just a slip. It's just a slip. And something needs to be done with that also. And I'm hoping that the police who come out there and try to change the behavior, they don't really need a ticket, but they do need to be made aware of it. That's all I'm
It's a
asking.
good point, yeah, thank you.
Because we did yesterday talk with FDOT on different ways to educate the public through flyers and printers out there to try to start educating people for it.
Facebook,
Facebook.
even though I didn't read comments of how much they hate it.
Oh, you still open? Please.
Rick Rizzuti, Satellite resident since 2012. What is the potential tax benefit if Oceana and Pelican are completely redeveloped and built?
The Oceana will be approximately about $360,000 in annual tax benefit once it's all completed.
Do we have a possible projection for the new South Bay, the area that we're being built over there by?
Not yet.
So we just don't know what's going there.
That's wrong.
Any non-residents like to speak?
Yes, thank you. Sandra again, from South Shores. So a couple things. I will send some record requests because the searches I've done, the statutes for giving notice when the area of the city changes. For example, when the PUD became part of the city, all of the residents of St. Patrick Shores, because even though it's not part of Patrick Shores, but the sign was just parked up and then it's moved down to it. And we're supposed to be notified through means of the official paper. And it's not supposed to be in the notices section, it's supposed to be in the main part, it's supposed to be like that. Search and no notice was given. I will make that records request and request that and find out if those notices were made, and I will review the appropriate statutes.
We know the statutes, and those advertisements were completed. I don't know where you got your information from, but it's incorrect.
I will send that.
So all the advertisements were all done for that project. We actually included it in the packet, all the ordinances and advertisements.
Okay, well, I will send that. Regarding PUD 3, I went over the plans for that in detail. In a conversation with you, you had mentioned that your hands are tied because of the PUD, it's all specified out. So I want everyone to be aware, they can look at it themselves versus online. And it specifies that the width, the length of the high-rise buildings that are on that plan are going to be no wider than 200 feet. So it's not possible to take a building to 85 feet high, as the technology is today, with it only a building that's 200 feet wide. So that might help alleviate
very possible to have a 200-foot width building with 85 feet in height. That's absolutely possible. So that happens all the time. So,
Okay, well, that's be interesting, you know, when we do that. So the next thing is the concurrency. You put the numbers from the Brevard County South Beach Sewage Plant. The director in a Save the Lagoon meeting specified, and then probably these calculated the same way, the phone usage already calculated. But he said that the plant was operating at 80% capacity. I'm sure these numbers equate to that. With a husband who's a civil engineer, generally a plant at 75% capacity is undergoing planning for expansion. And so on the concurrency, when you're at 80% capacity, you don't take a plant to 100% capacity. You don't do that. So the fact that you can, you know, you have spare room for these units is really misleading because you would never take a plant to 100% capacity. You know, just as you
the
saw.
Brevard, I mean, you have to direct your questions to Brevard County specifically
So
for
the
that.
point is, going by your own thing here on currency, you shouldn't be adding Oceana or other mid and high density buildings when you're already, you know, per this, it says, on the currency, local government must have enough infrastructure capability to serve each proposed development. Well, you're at 80% right now, so.
Well, you want to say that?
Yeah. So the Brevard County South Beaches sewer plant, I showed you the capacity that they have there. The capacity is the capacity. So you can't deny a development permit because you would never bring a plant to 100% capacity.
But you already did during the hurricane.
You're gonna have to let me answer, okay? The South Beaches sewer plant is undergoing an expansion right now. The county is currently planning for that. They're actually undergoing discussions of how they wanna do that.
It takes years though to implement.
Well, I'm not the utility director for Brevard County. I can just tell you what I know. So if people have questions for the utility director, I'm sure he'll be glad to answer that question. But they are undergoing plant expansion right now. They're trying to decide how they want to expand the plant and where. They have actually had it designed for the South Beaches plant just to expand it on site. But now because of the discharges, they're actually looking at possibility of either adding force mains or looking at storage tanks here at the sewer plant area here by our soccer fields, or actually a third option is actually putting a sewer plant there. So they're undergoing that. We requested, Indian Harbor Beach and City of Satellite Beach sent a letter to Brevard County requesting that they undergo a study to make sure all the options are looked at before they put a plant right by our soccer fields, largely because you know, there's a lot of issues with that, obviously.
So I appreciate what you're saying, but during the last hurricane, we were over 100% capacity because of the rain event. So if we're over 100% capacity, and we're running into that already, it takes time, it takes years to implement those changes. So there's.
Okay. So, like we said in the presentation, the sewer discharges, 60% of the sewer discharges throughout the entire county came from Brevard County utilities. The rest were other municipalities in the county. A lot of discharges happen across the state of Florida during a hurricane. That is not normal operating capacity. That's a lot of inflow and infiltration happens during a hurricane. Water gets into the pipes and overloads the plant. That happens a lot. How you fix that is lining the pipes, which is why you see county trucks all over the place, because in our residents, I have to say there's probably about 3 or 4 residents that I can actually name by name because they're at every county commission meeting complaining about it. They fast-tracked all of the projects that they had in mind and moved them up so they could get this done, so they could quit discharging, basically. Now they're looking at the plant expansion issue. The property that we're talking about with the 27 acres is not served by Brevard County Utilities. It's served by Cocoa Beach Utilities. And Cocoa Beach Utilities had very little discharge problems. So the idea that we can deny a building permit over at the 27 acres that we've been talking about for a utility problem is not feasible. It just doesn't, the argument doesn't hold water or sewer.
Any other questions from non-residents? Any other? First off, this is a great meeting, thank you. We sit in council meetings a lot of times and nobody shows up. So, again, staff, thank you. Thank you, everybody, for coming. We appreciate the input. If you need information, or if you see something you feel is not your answer, or you see it's wrong on Facebook, you're not sure, tell you she's the most wonderful person. She'll give you her phone number.
Probably on Facebook.
I really like my staff to spend time on doing stuff and not always correcting misleading information on Facebook. Time's money to us. And if you want the right information, I can tell you she's extremely accessible. We all are. The City Hall has the ability to give out our cell phone numbers, and we're here. And we'll be more than happy to talk to anybody on it. But again, thank you very, very much for coming.